The gleaming spires of Seriphus rose like crystal sentinels against the lavender sky. Through the transparent dome of the Galactic Youth Academy's main lecture hall, the twin moons cast their gentle glow upon rows of eager students. Seated among them, Liam Lynn Carter kept his eyes fixed on the entrance, mentally preparing himself for what was to come. The year was 2257, and the Galactic Youth Academy represented the pinnacle of interstellar education. Students from hundreds of star systems converged on this peaceful planet to learn the sciences, arts, and diplomacy that would shape the future of the Galactic Alliance. Most had grown up on civilized worlds with controlled climates and benevolent ecosystems. Few had even heard of Deathworlds beyond academic warnings. Lynn, however, was different. At 18, he was the first student from Earth to be directly admitted to the Academy, with the unusual title of Earth's Toughest Student, a distinction earned after surviving Myrath 9, the most notorious Deathworld in the Alliance. That experience had left him with scars, both visible and hidden. Memories that haunted his dreams and shaped his every movement. A hush fell over the auditorium as Commander Zareth strode toward the center platform. Tall and lean with skin the color of burnished copper, the teacher's presence commanded instant respect. His silver eyes surveyed the room before settling on Lynn. Today, Commander Zareth announced, "We begin our course on Alliance cultural integration. Each of you represents a unique world, a unique culture. Some of you come from ancient civilizations, others from emerging worlds." His gaze remained on Lynn. "And some come from planets that the Alliance considers challenging." Whispers rippled through the audience. Lynn felt the stares, the judgment, the curiosity. He had grown accustomed to it during his first week at the Academy. The Earth student, the Deathworlder, the oddity. "Carter," Commander Zareth said, "perhaps you would honor us by sharing your perspective. Earth joined the Alliance relatively recently, and your experience on Myrath 9 gives you a unique viewpoint." Lynn stood slowly, conscious of the 100 pairs of eyes following his movement. He cleared his throat. "Earth has been part of the Alliance for 83 years, he began, his voice steady despite his discomfort. "But many still consider us primitive because our planet shaped us differently. We evolved on what you classify as a Class 3 Deathworld, though we just called it home." A student with luminescent skin scoffed loudly enough for everyone to hear. Lynn identified her immediately, Xanthi Merrick from Euremia, the top student in their class. Her academic record was flawless, her confidence unwavering. "With all due respect," Xanthi said without being called upon, "theoretical survival simulations at the Euremia Institute have reached Standard 5.0. Your personal anecdotes, while entertaining, hardly qualify as academic insights." Commander Zareth raised an eyebrow but allowed the interruption. "Perhaps you'd care to elaborate on your experiences, Carter, specifically regarding Myrath 9. Lynn nodded, ignoring Xanthi's dismissive expression. "I was part of a research team. We were studying the ecosystem to determine if parts of Myrath 9 could be terraformed. The Alliance considers it a Class 5 Deathworld, the most dangerous classification." "We know the classification system," Xanthi interjected again. "What we don't need are unverifiable stories." A slight smile crossed Lynn's face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The truth doesn't require verification, Merrick. It simply is. But if evidence is what you want..." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a network of silvery scars crisscrossing his forearm. "These are from crossing the reflection planes during an acid storm. The medical report is in my file if you're interested in verification." The room fell silent. Even Xanthi seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Thank you, Carter," Commander Zareth said. "This perspective will be valuable as we progress through the course. Tomorrow, we'll begin practical applications with a standard survival simulation." As the class dispersed, a slender student with pale blue skin approached Lynn. "That was impressive," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Marlowe Sin, from Belinar 3. Lin shook his hand, surprised by the strength in Marlowe's seemingly fragile frame. "I've never met someone who survived a Class 5 before," Marlowe continued. "Most research teams send drones." "Drones malfunction in Myrath 9's atmosphere," Lin explained. "The mineral content disrupts standard guidance systems." "Fascinating," another voice chimed in. A tall student with geometric patterns etched into his dark skin joined them. "Kai Voss," he introduced himself. "AI research track. I'd love to hear more about those atmospheric effects sometime." Lin nodded, uncomfortable with the attention but grateful for the friendly faces. As they walked toward the dormitories, he couldn't help noticing Xanthi, watching them from a distance. Her luminescent skin glowing with barely contained irritation. That night, Lin dreamed of the reflection planes, endless stretches of crystalline sand that glittered like diamonds under Myrath 9's blood-red sun. Beautiful and deadly. The next morning, the class gathered in the simulation chamber, a massive room with walls of brushed metal and a floor that seemed to shift subtly beneath their feet. Commander Zareth stood at the control panel, inputting the day's parameters. "Today's simulation is straightforward," he explained. "A standard desert environment with moderate challenges. The objective is to locate water and establish a basic shelter. Alliance protocol requires all students to complete this baseline assessment." The students arranged themselves in the designated positions. Lin noticed the survival kits provided by the Academy, sleek, minimalist pouches containing technological solutions to every foreseeable problem. Nothing like the rugged, practical gear he'd carried on Myrath 9. Out of habit, he checked his own personal kit, secured in a pocket. "Begin simulation," Commander Zareth announced. The room transformed. The metal walls vanished, replaced by an endless desert landscape. A warm breeze carried the scent of sand and distant vegetation. The illusion was perfect. Almost. Lin immediately noticed subtle differences between this simulated environment and real deserts he had experienced. The air lacked the mineral taste. The light fell too evenly. The sand beneath his feet didn't quite shift with the correct resistance. As the students began to explore, following the standard procedures they'd memorized, a sudden alarm blared throughout the chamber. "System malfunction," an automated voice announced. "Unauthorized parameters detected. Emergency protocol activated." The simulated environment flickered, then transformed. The gentle desert vanished, replaced by a nightmarish wasteland. The sand beneath their feet bubbled with caustic chemicals. The sky darkened to a sickly yellow, and the air filled with a burning stench that made several students gag. "System locked," the voice continued. "Estimated reset time, 15 minutes. Students should employ protective measures." Panic spread through the group. The standard survival kits contained no protocols for acid wastelands. This scenario hadn't been in any of their briefings. While others froze or shouted questions at Commander Zareth, who was frantically working at the control panel, Lin acted instinctively. He pulled his personal survival kit from his pocket and assessed the situation. The simulation was creating real sensory effects. The smell and sensation of acid was convincing, though he knew the safety systems would prevent actual harm. But the psychological impact was real enough. Already, several students had fallen to their knees, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar environment. Lin spotted a group trapped in a depression where the simulated acid was pooling most intensely. Among them was Xanthi, her luminescent skin flickering with stress as she tried to maintain composure while searching her standard kit for appropriate tools. Without hesitation, Lin moved toward them, pulling items from his personal kit: a collapsible filtration mask, a packet of neutralizing powder, a length of carbon fiber cord. "Cover your mouths and noses," he called out, tossing spare filtration patches to the nearest students. "The simulation can't hurt you physically, but your brain doesn't know that." He reached the trapped group and quickly fashioned a makeshift bridge using components from his kit and debris from the simulated environment. One at a time, he instructed. Step exactly where I step. One by one, he guided them across, including a reluctant Xanthi who accepted his hand with obvious discomfort. As the last student reached safety, the alarm sounded again. Reset complete. Simulation ending. The acid wasteland dissolved, revealing the simulation chamber's metal walls once more. Commander Zareth looked shaken. My apologies, he said. It appears someone uploaded an experimental scenario that wasn't cleared for student use. Is everyone all right? The students nodded, many looking at Lynn with new respect. Even Xanthi seemed unable to formulate her usual dismissive comment. Carter, Commander Zareth said. Impressive response. Those weren't standard Academy techniques. No, sir, Lynn agreed. That was Myrath 9 training. As they filed out of the chamber, Marlowe fell into step beside Lynn. That was amazing, he said. How did you know what to do so quickly? Lynn shrugged. Experience. You have to tell us more. Kai joined in, excitement evident in his voice. That acid wasteland. It reminded me of something I've been working on for my AI simulations. Would you be willing to share your experiences for my project? Before Lynn could respond, he noticed a group of students gathered ahead, watching a news projection. At the center stood Xanthi, her expression smug. As I was saying, she was telling the group, the Earth students' reaction was instinctive, not intellectual. The difference between primitive survival and educated response. Lynn paused, considering whether to engage or walk away. The decision was made for him when Xanthi noticed his presence. Ah, Carter, she said, her tone falsely sweet. We were just discussing today's excitement. Quite the performance. It wasn't a performance, Lynn replied evenly. It was training and experience. Experience, Xanthi repeated. On this, Myrath 9. You know, the Academy's records show that only 3 research expeditions have ever returned from that planet. The last was nearly a year ago. That's correct, Lynn said, feeling a familiar tightness in his chest. I was on that expedition. How fortunate, Xanthi said, her skin pulsing with light that seemed to match her rising emotion. And now you're here, the first Earth student directly admitted to the Academy. One might wonder about the connection. If you have a question, Merrick, just ask it, Lynn said, his patience wearing thin. Very well, she said, stepping closer. Did you earn your place here, or did the Alliance admit you out of pity for being the sole survivor of a failed expedition? The corridor fell silent. Even Marlowe and Kai seemed unsure how to react. Lynn felt the old memories surging, the screams of his teammates, the howling wind carrying toxic dust, the sensation of his skin blistering under Myrath 9's relentless sun. He pushed them down, focusing on the present. I survived, he said quietly. Others didn't. If you think that makes me worthy of pity rather than respect, that says more about you than me. He turned and walked away, leaving Xanthi surrounded by uncomfortable silence. Later that night, unable to sleep, Lynn found himself in the memory archive room, a quiet space where students could access records and personal files. He pulled up the official report of the Myrath 9 expedition, something he'd avoided doing since arriving at the Academy. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the faces of his team, Dr. Eleanor Chen, the mission leader, Rashid Ahmed, the geologist, Maria Solano, the biologist, and 5 others, all experienced researchers, all dead now. The report was clinically detached. Expedition compromised by unexpected atmospheric storm. Communication lost on day 17. Sole survivor, L. Carter, recovered by emergency extraction team after activating distress beacon from secondary base camp. What the report didn't mention was the 30 days Lynn had spent alone on Myrath 9 before the extraction team arrived. 30 days of hell that had changed him forever. I didn't know anyone else would be here. Lynn turned to see Marlowe standing in the doorway, looking apologetic. I couldn't sleep, Marlowe explained, approaching cautiously. I like to read the old exploration records when my mind is too active. Lynn gestured for him to join. I'm just remembering. Marlowe glanced at the holographic display. Your team? Lynn nodded. We weren't prepared. Not really. The Alliance had classified Myrath 9 correctly, but classifications can't capture the reality. What happened? Marlowe asked softly. Lynn had never told the full story, not even to the debriefing team. But something about Marlowe's quiet presence made it easier. We were studying the reflection planes, he began. A vast expanse of crystalline sand that contains rare minerals the Alliance is interested in. Beautiful place, in a deadly way. The crystals reflect light in patterns that can hypnotize if you stare too long. He paused, remembering the shimmering landscape that had seemed to sing with alien colors. We'd been there for 2 weeks, collecting samples, running tests. Everything was going according to protocol. Then the storm came. The memories flooded back, vivid and terrible. Myrath 9 has these storms that appear without warning. Not just wind and dust. It's like the planet itself is attacking. The air fills with particles that burn through standard protective gear. The ground releases gases that can paralyze. And there are creatures, thin-limbed things with tentacles that shoot toxins. Marlowe listened, entranced and horrified. Our base camp was hit first. 3 researchers died in the initial surge. The rest of us tried to reach the transport vehicle, but the storm was too intense. We took shelter in a cave system, hoping to wait it out. Lynn's voice grew quieter. The caves weren't empty. Something lived there, something that hunted by sensing body heat. We lost 2 more before we realized what was happening. How did you survive? Marlowe asked. Dr. Chen, our team leader, she ordered me to make a run for the secondary base camp. Said I was the fastest, had the best chance. I didn't want to leave them, but... He closed his eyes. I went. The last thing I heard was screaming behind me. The memory archive room seemed suddenly cold and sterile compared to the vivid horror of his memories. The secondary camp was 15 kilometers across the reflection plains. I ran until my lungs felt like they were bleeding. When I got there, the communication array was damaged. It took me days to repair it enough to send a distress signal. By then, I knew no one else had made it. Marlowe was silent for a long moment. I'm sorry, he finally said. Xanthi had no right to trivialize that. Lynn shrugged. She doesn't understand. None of you really can, unless you've been there. Then help us understand, Marlowe suggested. Not just with stories, show us. Show you what? Your skills, your knowledge, the stuff that kept you alive when everything was against you. Lynn considered the idea. Why would that matter to anyone here? Because it's real, Marlowe said simply. Everything we learn here is theoretical or simulated. You faced the real thing and survived. That's worth more than any simulation. The next day, word had somehow spread about Lynn's nighttime conversation with Marlowe. When he entered the training hall for the scheduled close combat exercise, he found most of the class already waiting, including Xanthi at the front. Commander Zareth raised an eyebrow at the unusual attendance, but proceeded with the lesson. Today, we practice defensive techniques against larger opponents. The simulated gravity will be adjusted to represent various planetary conditions. As the students paired off for practice, Xanthi approached Lynn directly. I hear you've been telling more stories, she said, enlightening Marlowe with tales of your heroism. Lynn didn't respond, focusing on the warm-up exercises. I propose a demonstration, Xanthi continued. You and me, right now. Let's see if your Deathworld reflexes match up to Euremia's elite training. Several students had stopped to listen. Lynn could feel their curiosity, their desire to see the confrontation. This isn't a competition, Merrick, he said quietly. Isn't it? She challenged. You've been positioned as special since you arrived, Earth's toughest student. prove it's not just a sympathy title. Commander Zareth approached, having overheard the exchange. "An interesting proposal," he said. "A controlled demonstration between different training methodologies could be educational." Lin realized he was being maneuvered into a corner. Refusing would seem like weakness. Accepting meant putting his abilities on display like some sideshow attraction. "Fine," he agreed reluctantly. "Standard combat parameters." They took positions in the central practice area. Xanthi moved with fluid grace, her luminescent skin pulsing with confident energy. Lin stood still, his stance relaxed but alert, eyes never leaving his opponent. Commander Zareth set the simulation for moderate gravity, slightly heavier than Seraphis standard, but lighter than Earth. "Begin when ready," he instructed. Xanthi didn't hesitate. She launched forward with impressive speed. Her first strike aimed at Lin's midsection. He sidestepped with minimal movement, his body reacting before his conscious mind processed the attack. The pattern continued, Xanthi executing textbook-perfect techniques with increasing intensity. Lin responding with economical movements that seemed almost casual, where her style was elegant and technical. His was brutally efficient, shaped by environments where wasted energy meant death. After several minutes, frustration began to show in Xanthi's attacks. Her precision gave way to power as she tried to overwhelm Lin's defenses. The turning point came when she overextended on a complex combination strike. In a movement too fast for most observers to follow, Lin shifted inside her guard, swept her supporting leg, and pinned her to the mat with a restraint that looked simple, but was perfectly executed. "Yield," he said quietly. Xanthi struggled briefly before acknowledging defeat. As Lin helped her up, the training hall erupted in excited chatter. "Impressive display," Commander Zareth commented. "Merrick, your technique is excellent, but somewhat predictable. Carter, your style is unorthodox but undeniably effective. Would you care to explain your approach?" Lin hesitated, uncomfortable with the attention. "On Myreth 9, combat isn't about winning points or looking good. It's about ending threats with minimal energy expenditure. Every calorie counts when you're trying to survive. An important distinction," Commander Zareth noted. "Theory versus necessity. This is precisely why the Academy benefits from diverse perspectives." As the class dispersed, Kai approached Lin with evident excitement. "That was incredible. Your response time is at least 22% faster than the Academy average. Would you consider contributing data to my project? I'm developing an enhanced simulation program, Real Death Sim 1.0, that could integrate your experiences." Before Lin could respond, Marlowe joined them. "Give him space, Kai. He's not a research subject." "No, it's okay," Lin said, surprising himself. "What kind of data are you looking for?" "Sensory details, primarily," Kai explained. "The current simulations lack authenticity. The smell of toxic dust, the sensation of acid rain on skin, the sound of predators in total darkness. Details that can't be programmed without first-hand experience." The idea was intriguing. If it could help prepare others, maybe prevent what happened to my team, I'm in. Over the next few days, Lin found himself spending hours with Kai, recording detailed accounts of Myreth 9's environments. The process was unexpectedly therapeutic, transforming traumatic memories into potentially life-saving information. Marlowe often joined them, asking insightful questions that helped Lin articulate experiences he'd previously kept locked away. One evening, as they worked in Kai's lab, Lin found himself describing the Scarlet Sea, one of Myreth 9's most beautiful and deadly features. "It looks like an ocean of liquid rubies," he explained, watching as Kai's AI assistant, Athena, converted his words into visual approximations. "But it's actually a highly acidic compound that reacts with organic material on contact." "Temperature?" Kai prompted. "Varies between 40 and 60 degrees Celsius, depending on time of day. The surface bubbles constantly, releasing oxide vapors that form red clouds above the water. And you crossed this? Marlowe asked incredulously. Lynn nodded. The extraction point was on the other side. I had to construct a makeshift protective suit using material from the research station. Even then, the acid ate through in places. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing more of the silvery scarring. Each crossing took about 40 minutes. The suit lasted for 30. The last 10 minutes were difficult. What did it feel like? Kai asked, his voice hushed. Lynn closed his eyes, remembering. Like being slowly peeled. The acid has a metallic taste when it gets through your mask, like blood but sharper. The red oxide foam makes a hissing sound as it dissolves your protective layer. You feel every millimeter of exposed skin burning while trying not to breathe too deeply, because the vapors will scar your lungs. When he opened his eyes, both Kai and Marlowe were staring at him with a mixture of horror and awe. That's what's missing from the simulations, Kai said after a moment. That level of sensory detail, the psychological impact. It changed how I approach everything, Lynn admitted. After the Scarlet Sea, I never go anywhere without basic protective gear. I never fully trust any environment. And I never assume technology will save me. As Kai continued recording, Lynn noticed Marlowe studying him with an unreadable expression. What? He asked. I'm just wondering what we look like to you, Marlowe said. Students who've never faced anything real, playing at survival in our safe simulations. The question caught Lynn off guard. I don't judge anyone for not experiencing hell, he said finally. In fact, I hope none of you ever have to. Word of their project spread quickly through the academy. Some students began stopping by the lab to listen to Lynn's accounts, fascinated by details of a world so different from their own safe, civilized planets. Others, including several instructors, expressed concern about the appropriateness of introducing Deathworld experiences into the standard curriculum. The question. Dr. Aryan Vesh, head of simulation technology, said during a faculty meeting that Lynn had been invited to attend, is whether grafting Deathworld skills into our civilized learning environment poses unnecessary psychological risks. Commander Zareth's silver eyes flicked to Lynn. Perhaps Mr. Carter could address that concern directly. Lynn stood, conscious of the senior faculty's scrutiny. With respect, Dr. Vesh, survival isn't civilized or uncivilized. It's universal. The skills that kept me alive on Myreth 9 aren't inherently dangerous. They're just tested under extreme conditions. And yet, Dr. Vesh countered, we must consider whether exposing students to such extreme scenarios serves our educational mission or merely sensationalizes danger. I survived because someone taught me to prepare for worst-case scenarios, Lynn said firmly. Not to frighten me, but to equip me. There's a difference between fetishizing danger and respecting it enough to be ready. The debate continued, but Lynn could see he'd made an impression. By the end of the meeting, Dr. Vesh had reluctantly approved Kai's real death sim project for limited testing, with the stipulation that Lynn would help develop appropriate safety protocols. As Lynn left the administrative building, he found Xanthi waiting outside. Her luminescent skin dimmed to a subtle glow in the evening light. Quite the advocate, she said, falling into step beside him. You've managed to convince half the faculty that your Deathworld perspective belongs in our curriculum. That wasn't my goal, Lynn replied. I just answered their questions. Yes, you're good at that, Xanthi said. Answering questions, telling stories, winning people over. It's almost too perfect. Lynn stopped walking. What exactly are you implying, Merrick? Her luminescence intensified slightly. Only that your rapid rise from tragedy to Academy darling seems convenient. One might wonder if your Deathworld experience has been enhanced for dramatic effect. You think I'm lying? Lynn asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I think the line between survival and storytelling can blur, she said, especially when the audience is so eager to believe. There are rumors that you've used biohacking to augment your abilities, that your scars and enhanced reflexes aren't just from natural adaptation. The accusation hit Lin like a physical blow. After everything he'd endured, to be accused of fabrication was unbearable. My medical records are complete, he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. The Alliance physicians documented everything during my recovery. Records can be adjusted, Xanthi suggested, especially for someone the Alliance wants to showcase as a success story. You have no idea what you're talking about, Lin said, turning away before he said something he'd regret. Prove it then, Xanthi called after him. If your abilities are genuine, prove it in a real test, not just stories and controlled demonstrations. The next day, Lin discovered that Xanthi's insinuations had spread throughout the academy. Students who had previously listened to his accounts with fascination now regarded him with skepticism. Even Kai seemed hesitant when Lin arrived at the lab. Is something wrong? Lin asked, noticing the change immediately. There's been talk, Kai admitted reluctantly, about the accuracy of your experiences. And you believe it? I don't know what to believe, Kai said. The data you've provided is extraordinary. Maybe too extraordinary. Lin felt a familiar coldness settling in his chest, the same isolation he'd experienced on Myrath 9. I see. We're not saying it's impossible, Kai hurried to add. Just that verification would help silence the critics. My medical records aren't enough. The Alliance investigation, the actual scars on my body. People are suggesting those could be. Kai trailed off, uncomfortable. Fake, Lin finished for him. Engineered for attention or advancement. I'm sorry, Kai said. If there was some way to definitively prove... There is. A new voice interrupted. Commander Zareth stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. The life or death trial. The term sent a ripple of shock through the room. The life or death trial was legendary among Academy students, a comprehensive simulation designed to test survival skills under extreme conditions. It was typically reserved for final year assessment, and rumors suggested it had caused multiple psychological breakdowns over the years. That would be excessive, Kai protested. No one is questioning Lin's abilities to that degree. Aren't they? Commander Zareth's silver gaze fixed on Lin. Ms. Merrick has formally requested that the faculty evaluate Mr. Carter's claims through objective assessment. Several instructors support her petition. Let me guess, Lin said bitterly. Dr. Vesh is among them. Commander Zareth inclined his head slightly. The doctor has expressed concern about basing curriculum changes on potentially exaggerated accounts. So I have to prove myself in a simulation to validate my actual experiences? The irony wasn't lost on Lin. You don't have to do anything, Commander Zareth said. You can decline the challenge. But they both knew he couldn't. Not without confirming the suspicions. When? Lin asked. Tomorrow. The main simulation chamber. Open observation. After Commander Zareth left, Kai apologized profusely, but Lin barely heard him. His mind was already preparing, shifting into the survival mindset that had kept him alive on Myrath 9. That evening, as he packed his personal survival kit, Marlowe appeared at his dormitory door. You don't have to do this, Marlowe said without preamble. Xanthi is just jealous because you've become the center of attention. It doesn't matter why, Lin replied, continuing his methodical preparation. The challenge has been made public. If I back down now, everything I've shared becomes suspect. Then, let me help you prepare, Marlowe offered. I've studied the historical records of the life or death trial. The simulation typically includes 3 phases: a desert crossing, a toxic forest, and a cave system with sensory predators. Lin looked up, surprised by the specific information. How do you know that? A faint smile crossed Marlowe's face. I have my own areas of expertise. Before coming to the academy, I survived the Belinar plague. 3 months in quarantine while the virus ravaged my planet. I know something about survival, just in a different context. For the first time, Lynn saw Marlowe in a new light, not just as a supportive friend, but as someone who had also faced death and emerged changed. Together, they spent hours reviewing potential scenarios and refining strategies. Marlowe's knowledge of biochemistry complemented Lynn's practical experience, creating a more comprehensive approach than either could have developed alone. By morning, Lynn felt as prepared as possible. When he entered the simulation chamber, he found it transformed. The usual open space had been configured with observation platforms surrounding a central arena. Faculty members and students filled the platforms, with Xanthi prominently placed in the front row. Dr. Vesh stood at the control console, her expression severe. "Mr. Carter, today you will undertake the life or death trial, a comprehensive survival simulation designed to test skills under extreme conditions. The trial consists of 3 phases, each representing a different environmental challenge. Success requires completing all objectives while maintaining life-sustainable conditions." She gestured to a display showing biometric monitors. "Your vital signs will be tracked throughout. While the simulation cannot cause permanent physical harm, the sensory experiences are designed to be psychologically authentic." Lynn nodded, running through his mental checklist one final time. "The trial begins in 30 seconds, Dr. Vesh announced. Once initiated, it cannot be terminated except by completion, failure, or medical emergency." As the countdown began, Lynn caught sight of Marlowe giving him a subtle thumbs up. Commander Zareth stood nearby, his silver eyes intent. "Trial commencing," Dr. Vesh said, activating the system. The simulation chamber disappeared, replaced by a vast wasteland that combined elements of desert and acidic barrens. The sky above burned a sickly yellow, and the ground beneath Lynn's feet shifted unpredictably between sand and caustic shale. A holographic display appeared before him, showing 3 objectives: locate a water source, collect antitoxin herbs, and evade sonic-sensitive predators. Without hesitation, Lynn began moving, his senses immediately cataloging the environment. The simulation was impressively detailed. He could smell the acrid tang of chemicals in the air, feel the heat radiating from the ground, hear the subtle hiss of acid eating into stone. Using techniques honed on Myrath 9, he identified signs of water, the slight discoloration of distant rocks, the pattern of erosion in the landscape. Within 20 minutes, he had located a hidden spring bubbling from beneath a shelf of protective stone. The second phase transported him to a forest of skeletal trees, their pale trunks oozing toxic sap that gathered in pools on the ground. Here, Lynn had to identify and collect specific plants with antitoxin properties while avoiding contact with the more dangerous flora. Drawing on knowledge shared during his sessions with Kai and Marlowe, he methodically gathered the required specimens, using his survival kit to test samples before collection. The process was painstaking but precise. As he completed the second objective, Lynn noticed a subtle change in the simulation. The lighting flickered momentarily, and a warning indicator flashed at the edge of his vision. "System fluctuation detected," an automated voice announced. "Recalibrating environmental parameters." Something was wrong. The simulation's ambient sounds had shifted, taking on a more realistic quality that went beyond the program's capabilities. The air in the chamber felt heavier, carrying traces of actual chemicals rather than simulated scents. Before he could process the implications, the scene transformed again. The skeletal forest gave way to a vast cave system, illuminated only by phosphorescent fungi clinging to the walls. The final phase had begun, but Lynn's instincts told him this was no longer just a simulation. From the observation platform, Xanthi watched with growing unease. What had started as a challenge to expose what she believed was Carter's exaggeration had evolved into something more intense than any simulation she'd witnessed. "Dr. Vesh," she said, approaching the control console. "The sensory outputs seem excessive. Is this standard for the trial?" Dr. Vesh frowned, studying the readings. "We're experiencing some anomalous feedback in the atmospheric controls. Nothing dangerous. But..." Her fingers moved across the console. "This is strange. The system is pulling data directly from Carter's neural patterns, creating a more personalized environment than intended." On the platform adjacent to them, Marlowe tensed. "That's not right," he said, moving closer. "The trial is supposed to be standardized. If it's adapting to Lynn's experiences specifically, it could be recreating aspects of Myreth 9, Commander Zareth finished, joining them at the console. "Dr. Vesh, can you stabilize the parameters?" "I'm trying," she replied, increasingly concerned. The integration between Real Death Sim and the standard program has created an unexpected synergy. We're getting environmental effects beyond the simulation's normal capacity. In the cave system, Lynn became aware of a subtle but critical change. The air carried a trace of actual toxic gas, not enough to cause serious harm, but definitely not just simulated scent. The simulation had somehow affected the chamber's environmental controls, releasing small amounts of real chemicals into a contained area. He could see other students in the observation area beginning to notice the acrid smell. Some were covering their mouths and noses, while others looked to the faculty with concern. Then he heard it, a strangled cough followed by a thud. Turning, he saw Marlowe collapsed on the floor of the observation platform, gasping for breath. Nearby, Xanthi was backing away, her luminescent skin flickering erratically in distress. "Emergency override," Dr. Vesh called out, her fingers flying across the console. "System not responding. Manual shutdown required." Lynn assessed the situation with the clarity that extreme danger had taught him. The chemicals were pooling in the lower section of the chamber, where Marlowe had fallen. The ventilation system was continuing to circulate the toxins rather than clearing them. "The main circuit breaker," he shouted to Commander Zareth. "It's the only way to force a complete shutdown." "Locked behind safety protocols," Commander Zareth replied. 30-second countdown required." Lynn didn't hesitate. He abandoned the simulation objectives and sprinted toward the observation platform, pulling his emergency rebreather from his survival kit. Reaching Marlowe, he placed the device over his friend's face before turning to help others away from the affected area. "Everyone move to higher ground," he ordered, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to life or death situations. "The toxins are heavier than air. They'll concentrate at floor level." As students and faculty scrambled to comply, Lynn made his way to the control console. The main circuit breaker was located behind a reinforced panel, designed to prevent accidental shutdown during simulations. "It's locked," Dr. Vesh said. Her voice strained through the mask she'd donned. "The override requires both authorization and a physical key." Lynn examined the panel. "Where's the key?" "In my office," she admitted. "This wasn't supposed to be possible." The toxin levels were rising. Lynn could feel the burn in his lungs with each breath, the familiar sensation bringing back vivid memories of Myreth 9. But unlike then, he wasn't alone, and others were depending on him. "There's another way," he said, pulling tools from his survival kit. "The ventilation system has an emergency purge function, standard in all Alliance facilities. If we can access the maintenance panel." Commander Zareth immediately understood. "East wall, behind the primary display." Lynn moved quickly, ignoring the increasing pain in his chest. The maintenance panel was secured with standard bolts, which he removed using a multi-tool from his kit. Inside, a complex array of circuits controlled the chamber's life support systems. "We have 28 seconds before the automatic lockdown engages," Dr. Vesh called out, watching the countdown on her display. If that happens, the room seals completely until external emergency response arrives. Working with practiced efficiency, Lin identified the ventilation override. The system required a specific sequence of connections to activate the emergency purge without triggering additional safety lockdowns. His vision began to blur, the toxins affecting his nervous system despite his experience with similar chemicals. Each breath became more difficult, but his hands remained steady, connecting circuits with precise movements. 10 seconds, Dr. Vesh warned. Lin made the final connection. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a thunderous roar, the ventilation system engaged at maximum capacity. Powerful fans drew the contaminated air upward and out through emergency filtration systems. As fresh air flooded the chamber, the simulation flickered and died, returning the room to its neutral state. The countdown froze at 3 seconds remaining. Lin staggered back from the maintenance panel, his body finally responding to the stress and toxin exposure. He made it halfway to where Marlowe lay before his knees buckled. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Xanthi's face. Her expression transformed from smug superiority to something that looked remarkably like respect. Lin awoke in the Academy's medical center, the sterile white ceiling coming into focus above him. A monitoring device beeped steadily beside the bed, tracking his vital signs. "Welcome back," Marlowe's voice came from nearby. Lin turned to see his friend, sitting in a chair, looking pale but alert. "You've been out for about 6 hours. "The others?" Lin asked, his throat raw. "Everyone's fine. Minor respiratory irritation, nothing serious. You got the worst of it because you were closest to the source." Lin nodded, relieved. "What happened with the simulation?" "They're still investigating. But apparently Kai's real death sim program interfaced with the standard system in ways no one anticipated. It started pulling data directly from your neural patterns, creating a hybrid environment that affected the actual chamber controls." "Kai must be devastated," Lin said, knowing how much the project had meant to his friend. "Actually, he's ecstatic," Marlowe said with a small smile. After they confirmed everyone was safe, all he could talk about was the unprecedented neural environmental synchronization. Dr. Vesh has already approved a revised version of the project with enhanced safety protocols. Before Lin could respond, the door opened, and Commander Zareth entered, followed by Xanthi. The commander's expression was as unreadable as ever, but Xanthi looked uncharacteristically subdued. "Mr. Carter," Commander Zareth said, "the medical staff informs me you'll make a full recovery. Your experience with similar toxins appears to have given you a measure of resistance." "Fortunate," Lin said simply. "Indeed." The commander's silver eyes studied him. "Your actions today demonstrated exactly what we hope to evaluate. Not just survival skills, but the judgment and leadership that come from genuine experience." Xanthi stepped forward, her luminescent skin dimmed to its lowest setting. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "I questioned your integrity and abilities out of competitive pride. Today proved me wrong." The admission clearly cost her, but Lin could see it was sincere. Skepticism isn't a character flaw, Merrick. In many environments, it's a survival trait. A hint of her usual confidence returned. "Nevertheless, I was wrong. Your knowledge and skills are genuine, and they saved lives today." After they left, Marlowe laughed softly. "I never thought I'd see Xanthi Merrick admit she was wrong about anything." "Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities," Lin said, remembering his own transformative moments on Myrath 9. The following week, as Lin recovered, the Academy underwent a subtle but significant shift. Dr. Vesh announced that the Simulation Technology Department would be developing a new curriculum track incorporating enhanced environmental realism, based on documented experiences from extreme conditions. Kai's real death sim project, now with additional safety measures, became the foundation for this initiative. Students began approaching Lin not with skepticism, but with genuine interest in his experiences and techniques. Even Xanthi, though still maintaining her academic competitiveness, now acknowledged Lin's expertise, occasionally seeking his input on practical applications of theoretical concepts. One evening, as Lin sat in the Academy's library compiling notes for what was evolving into a comprehensive survival handbook, Commander Zareth joined him. "Your project is progressing well," the commander observed, glancing at the extensive documentation spread across the table. "It helps to organize the experiences," Lin explained. "Makes them feel useful rather than just traumatic." Commander Zareth nodded. "That's precisely why the Academy has approved your appointment as a special consultant to the survival simulation program. Your perspective bridges a critical gap between theory and reality." Lin looked up, surprised. "I'm still a student." "One with unique qualifications," Commander Zareth replied. "The Alliance values individuals who can translate difficult experiences into knowledge that benefits others. Your handbook will become required reading." As the commander departed, Lin returned to his work with renewed purpose. The memories of Myrath 9 would always be part of him. The terror, the loss, the pain. But now they served a greater purpose, potentially saving lives rather than just haunting his dreams. 2 days later, Lin entered a lecture hall filled with new students, first years from dozens of different worlds, their faces bright with curiosity and anticipation. At the front of the room, Dr. Vesh introduced him. "Today, we begin a new component of your educational journey," she announced. "Earth's toughest student, Liam Carter, will share insights from experiences that few in the Alliance have survived to document. These lessons will form the foundation of our enhanced survival curriculum." As Lin took his place at the center of the platform, he saw Marlowe and Kai giving him encouraging nods from the back of the room. Even Xanthi was present, her luminescent skin glowing with interested attention rather than competitive energy. "Survival isn't about being the strongest or smartest," Lin began, his voice steady and clear. "It's about respecting environments, understanding your limitations, and adapting when circumstances change. My time on Myrath 9 taught me that preparation matters, but so does the ability to improvise when preparation isn't enough." As he spoke, sharing knowledge that had been painfully acquired, Lin realized he had found something he hadn't expected at the Galactic Youth Academy. Not just acceptance or validation, but purpose. The experiences that had nearly destroyed him now served as a bridge between worlds, between theory and reality, between those who had faced death and those who hoped never to encounter it. The Deathworld would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him completely. Now, it was simply one chapter in a continuing story, one that might help write better endings for others facing their own impossible challenges across the vast expanse of stars.